Do you know there are correct and accurate ways of marking support and resistance? Because support and resistance zone are pivot points as far as the market is concerned, where we expect price action to occur as far as trading is concerned. And in these zones of support and resistance are the area where we make basic trading decisions as far as trading the financial market is concerned. So in this particular video, I'll be sharing with you how exactly you can identify your valid support and resistance zone. So these valid support and resistance zones are those zones where you will be making your trading decision. Many often, when we mark these zones, we realize that price validate these zones of support and resistance that we have marked. And you keep wondering what exactly is the challenge, why price keep invalidating your area of support and resistance. This is the reason. One of those reasons is that you are treating this area of support and resistance just as I've marked now. It is a common thing you do. You always pick your horizontal line and mark a zone such as this, and you call it your support and resistance line. So you only mark that place as a line. That is one of the mistakes we are doing when it comes to identify area of valid support and resistance zone. So if that is the case, how then do we mark area of support and resistance? It is important, number one, that your area of support and resistance zone, area of support and resistance must be treated as a zone. Being treated as a zone simply means that you will not be considering this line as your area of support and resistance. So what do? You would treat it as a zone. And how do we identify this zone when it comes to marking of our support and resistance? One of the way to do it is for you to identify. You can see that in this zone, in all of this place, price reverses from here and move all the way to this downside. So what all you need to do is for you now to mark the last, pick the highest candle in this zone before this move to the downside. The candle with the highest high. So you will mark the high of that candle and the low of that candle. So in this scenario, we have this particular bearish candle that have the highest high and the low. So if you have to mark it using a line, it simply means that you will mark this candle this way. Do you see that? So what that means is that in between these two lines is now your area of support and resistance. So you are not treating it as a line, you are now treating all of this place as a zone. Now this is how to mark accurate support and resistance zone, not support and resistance line. Okay? Now, having established, now we have marked the resistance, and if you look toward this downside as well, we have this bearish candle which have the highest move. So you can see that the wick of that bearish candle extend to the upside, to the downside, and then this. So we will now do what as well. We will pick our horizontal line and mark it this way as well. So we are marking our zone of support and our zone of resistance. So here now, this is a support. So you can see how simple this can be, right? So this that we have marked here now is our resistance. So this is a resistance zone and this is a support zone. Okay, so this is how you can mark support and resistance zone. You can as well use your rectangle to do the marking. Yeah, you mark something like this to cover up to that zone. So you see it perfectly okay. So this is now your zone of support and resistance. Now, another thing I want you to take note of is the fact that support and resistance must be an obvious level. It must be an obvious level. Remember, you are not the only person trading on this market. So if you are not the only person, it simply means that any point you are marking, that you are the only one who can identify that point, it means there is a challenge. It means there is a challenge because you are not the only trader who will be making entry in those zones. So you should be marking zones that are obvious to the naked eye. For instance, this zone is obvious because you see price taking the move from this zone all the way into this particular support zone. And this particular support zone, you can see this zone. You see how price move from here to this upside. So this is an obvious support zone. And you can see how price return into this particular support zone, and then automatically here now become a resistance zone. So you can see how price left this zone back here. So having marked here before, here should have been our entry, and then you see that the movement of price from this zone is very, very significant when you are viewing it. And whenever, when price came to this resistance, we were expecting it to hold price and then let there be a selling pressure. True to it, price came into this zone, got resisted, and it sold to the downside. So we can see that selling of price to the downside, right? However, we know that price is still very much bullish. So what is the next thing that happened? Price break out of this resistance zone. So it is important for you to know that whenever price approach a resistance zone, it is a resistance zone. But when price break out of a resistance zone, it becomes a breakout. But that breakout still remain a that breakout still remain a resistance until price retest it, which is what you are seeing here. So price break out of it, price retest it. This retest now will validate this zone either into becoming a support or into becoming a resistance. So whenever a resistance zone, first this zone was a resistance, here was a support. Whenever price break a resistance zone and retest that zone, the zone ceases to be a resistance zone, it will now become a support. Because price retest it, it was able to withhold price, and then price push from there to the upside. So automatically now, this zone is no longer a support zone, but it has now become what? It is no longer a resistance zone, I beg your pardon, but it has instead become a support zone. So here now is our support zone. So you can see that because price has break it. So in this support zone, subsequently maybe price will pull down here and then retest it another time and then continue to the upside. And that is how we come about with this structural point of. So if you connect your structural point, you realize what price is now. Can you see that? This is how we come about our higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, and then higher low. So all of these are functions of price reaction. Okay, so whenever a resistance zone is being broken and price retest it, the resistance ceases to be a resistance, it automatically becomes a support zone. And whenever a support zone, for instance, in this scenario, just a moment. Okay, the same thing happened here. When this price was coming, here was a resistance. So this resistance was broken, price retest it, and price continues. So automatically, when price break, this initially was a resistance. So when price break it, it automatically now becomes a support by the virtue of the retest of that price action. Right, beautifully well. This is what I want to show you. In this scenario, when price was coming here, this was acting as a support zone. So this price is expected to hit and continue to the upside. But that was not the case. Price break this particular support. So whenever price break a support and price retest the support, automatically it is no longer a support. It becomes a resistance by the virtue of that retest. And that is why you see price continue this way, and then it begin to give us structural point of a lower high, lower high, and then you have that lower low, lower low, lower low, all the way to this downside until we now have this break of structure. So this is exactly how you can identify your support and resistance. Remember, we have discussed two major factors in the course of this class. That number one, you must treat your area of support and resistance as a zone. And then number two, you must know how to identify valid zone. It must be a zone that is obvious to the eye. You don't need to struggle to identify which of these zones is a support and resistance zone. The movement of price from that zone should be able to define it. Unlike this zone, this as well is another zone. Because you see how price return from there obviously to the downside. So that is what we should take note of. Wow. Now looking at this zone, just showed something. You can see this zone. Look at how price respect this zone several times. Do you see that? So why do you think price was respecting it? You see that obvious movement of price from that zone. Another obvious movement of price from that zone. Price came there again. Another obvious rejection of price from that zone. So this is how you identify a valid support and resistance zone. Let the zone be clear, right? Don't come and begin to mark something like this and then you are calling it support and resistance zone. Let's say this point. Don't come and begin to mark something like this. You come and mark this point that is a resistance zone, this is a support zone. No. Or you come here and say this is a support zone, this is a resistance zone. No. Or you come here, you now mark this point, this is a resistance zone. No, no, no. Let it be obvious. Let it be a point that is obvious, a point that is very clear to your eyes. That's exactly how you can identify these zones. So what is your assignment? Your assignment is for you to go to your chart and do a critical markup of these zones. Identify these zones, mark it out, and observe how price behave in that zone. In the subsequent video, I will be sharing with you how exactly you can now make entry trading the support and resistance zone. Thank you for watching and see you in the subsequent video. And please do not forget to give this video a like, share, subscribe, turn on your notification bell so you'll be the first to get notified when we upload our next video.